Well, good evening and welcome, everyone. Those of you who have attended NYPAY events in the past would know me, but just to fill that in for people who haven't, my name is David True, and I'm the president of NYPAY. NYPAY is a New York-based organization that has been doing kind of payments, fintech, and banking events for over 10 years, probably 12, 13 years. The events were initially all physically present. After COVID, we went to virtual events, and now we're actually starting up with in-person events again in September. So we're going to do a combo of those. Anyway, I'd like to thank, before I get going any further, I'd like to thank Further Advisory, who are sponsors, without whom this would not be possible. Um, we've got a fantastic topic tonight, and I really love the way it's been assembled. So I'm very much looking forward to it.
Hi, welcome everyone. I'm Maria Dalbert. I'm a partner at Further Advisory. We are a boutique strategy consulting firm that work at the intersection of technology, strategy, and operations. And we are very much in the payments and banking space. And we really love this topic because it's about how you translate the ability to do to some sort of reality and execution. So we are excited to focus on this panel. We had a pre-conversation where we excitedly talked about a lot of themes around how making sure that we level set on the opportunity, talk about learnings and success factors, and then talk about what's key for success in the future. So I'm going to turn this over to my colleagues who are going to be participating in the panel and talk about where their focus is in AI, data, and payments.
I think I'm just going to start. My name
Yeah,
is Erin McCune. I am a partner at Bain. I've been a payments consultant for longer than I want to admit. And although I work across the value chain with various participants in the industry, both new entrants and incumbents, and I do a lot of due diligence for private equity, I got involved with AI and payments, Gen AI and payments, most recently, sort of as the new language models sort of came to everyone's attention. We have a partnership with OpenAI, we have a partnership with Microsoft, and I led the work at Bain early on to identify payments industry use cases. And then have been involved in conversations with various customers of ours about what the implications are. So that's my entree into this particular conversation. But I would say that my excitement about it or enthusiasm really comes from decades of work in the payments industry and the recognition that there's a lot of unstructured data on either side of these transactions. And so I'm kind of excited about that. That's the Gen AI piece. The rest of it, we all know a lot about that we can share, but that's a little bit less current and sexy, but probably where the real money is.
Satish, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hey everyone, good evening. Satish Balasubramanian, VP, Head of Architecture and Digital Platforms in Deluxe. Before Deluxe, I used to work for one of the leading credit card companies. So I've been in payments, fintech space for more than 20 years, both in my previous job and in the current one in Deluxe. What I've been closely associated with is building the data platform and then using AI and ML from data monetization, data product generation, and how it could really drive business. So we have explored multiple use cases. I'm here to talk about how the hype of AI actually meets the reality. What do we see in the real world? What are the use cases that we are exploring? What are the use cases that are in test exploration phase, which are the use cases we actually see much more value that we have taken into production and made real use of it. We'll talk more through the course.
And good evening, everyone. I'm Andrew Glass. I'm a partner at K&L Gates. I'm in our payments, fintech, and financial services practice group. And in that capacity, help advise clients on the legal regulatory and compliance risks with implementing AI as part of their business strategy. And some of the things I'm excited for the panel to talk about tonight and explore, and things that we advise our clients on, are looking at both the opportunities of participating in for instance, the CFPB's open banking rule, once that's finalized and issued. Because to Erin's point, there's a lot of data that will become available to people who haven't had data or reliable sources of data in the past. Also helping clients recognize when they may be a covered entity under the CFPB, including open banking, including their larger participant rule, helping clients understand from a state regulatory perspective, where state regulators may be enforcing both state and federal law and have the compliance obligations under those regimes. And then understanding, again, this CFPB is sort of a central focus and a marker, I think, for a lot of regulatory thinking about how AI might be implemented into business strategies. You know, when does a vendor become a covered entity? When they're acting as a principal business arm, outsourced business arm for a financial services company, for instance. And when are financial services companies responsible for knowing and being able to explain to their regulators how their vendors' services work, including the algorithms that are often considered proprietary and difficult for historically for financial services companies to explain satisfactorily to their regulators. So those are the kinds of things that I've focused on, and I think will be helpful in understanding the monetization and the value that you might get ultimately in implementing an AI strategy.
Great. So this is the panel. So you can see why we're excited, because it's a really interesting cross-section of folks who've been involved in different aspects of building data products, which is one of the things I've done, and advising throughout the development of the AI frameworks, bringing it to reality, and then thinking about the regulatory and partnership implications and risks. So before we sort of dig into the considerations and learnings and success factors, because we're, particularly around Gen AI, we're sort of 18 plus months in from the big announcement of the first, sort of official launch externally of large language models in a very public way. I guess it would be good to just do a quick on what do we mean when we talk about AI, and just doing a quick level set on that. And then I have something around data monetization, because that's a word that's thrown a lot, and a lot of people are like, what does that really mean? And so I'll talk through that. But do we want to just say, one of you take a crack at saying, what do we mean about AI? What are the different categories to think about?
I want Satish to do this, and then I'm going to probably layer in.
Sure.
I think the technologist should go
The first pass, fair enough.
Otherwise, I'm going to get in trouble.
They get mushed, and I don't think that helps.
I have some observations to share, but
Sure. I thought strategy first, then technologist, but I'm happy to take it. So I think when we talk about AI, probably I think the latest and greatest is generative AI. So probably we all associate AI with generative AI. There are some good materials which talks about what is the entire chronological order of how we have even passed it from statistical modeling all the way to what we now call as a traditional predictive machine learning, where we just use data to extrapolate forecast, time series, and things like that. So there has been traditional machine learning, which I think companies have been using effectively for, I would say, last 10 plus years. It started with big tech companies, but then many financial institution payments, we have used the traditional machine learning for forecasting the payment. What is the best way to pay? What is the best time to pay? How is my entire, like say, the payment cycle is looking like? The time series prediction, the anomalies prediction. What is a typical schedule, and are there anomalies that exist? So there has been multiple usage of traditional machine learning techniques, be it structured, meaning be it supervised, unsupervised, the deep learning, where we could even get into something like neural networks and things like that. So there has been multiple use cases that people have been playing around with. And we have seen this time and again, when you go to something like an Amazon.com, when it starts recommending, or you go to Netflix, you watch one movie, it recommends the next movie. All these are traditional machine learning models. So that has been in existence. Now, I think what we keep talking about more is what is generative AI, which is transformer models. So it talks about, meaning we have all been used to these words of large language models, GPT. So what effectively it means is these are like large models which have been trained against billions and billions of data. And then they start doing those responses that we see, generation of content. I think the traditional machine learning was more used for forecasting, predicting, and things like that. But now what we see is more content generation. The content could be in terms of language. I think one of my mentor used to say this earlier. I think the missions needed mission languages, which is binary. You feed them with 0 or 1. But I think with ChatGPT or whatever we see with all the large language models, now we could actually talk to a machine in English. You ask an English question or probably any language question that you're comfortable with, it's responding back with the answers that you are looking for. So that's the big leap that we have taken. And then I think there are other advanced where we keep talking about AGIs and things like that. But I think for the conversation purpose, I think I would just say two pockets. One is the traditional machine learning model, which is all predictive, and then all the generative AI-based, which is generation transformer-based models that we are currently dealing with.
And I think what I would layer on top of that is when we talk about this in the payments industry, I always want to give credit and remind everyone that machine learning is very mature in our industry. We have really, really advanced fraud models. We do a really good job with underwriting. We have invested significant effort in AI and machine learning to date. A lot of that, however, is based on structured data. Payments is all based on, set standards of structured data, the payments format themselves, the information is coming in a manner that we know what we're dealing with, and that's allowing us to do very, very effective, very fast, responsive evaluation of transactions in real time to route them, for instance. What's different about Gen AI is that we're going to be able and are already applying these new models to unstructured data, of which there is a lot that accompanies these payments that is often related to the exception handling, the activities that occur before and after a transaction, when we're onboarding a merchant, when we're dealing with chargebacks, when we're trying to evaluate, whose invoice is this? Where did it come from? Should I even pay it? Those sorts of things, which have been much more difficult to automate. So that's why I keep telling people, I can't retire, because we're finally going to be able to automate some of these processes. I've been banging my head against a wall trying to automate this stuff for most of my career. We're finally going to do it.
Yeah.
And we see, to Erin's point, a lot of interest in using that unstructured data to improve business efficiencies, with clients coming to us and asking, obviously, what are the risks associated?
Can I do this?
With doing
Is
this?
It my
Can
data?
I do this?
Is it my data?
Is it my data? And we see the CFPB pointing to the idea that it's the consumer's data, or we see lawsuits that have been brought against some lending institutions where they're trying to use AI as an assist to their call centers to cut down on the time of call, so that they can process more things, have better service, and resolve problems with less cost. But also it invokes privacy law. And so there's a real intersection there of where the costs, that the externalities that are associated with using unstructured data, which I think we'll continue to talk about during the course of the evening.
Yeah.
And like, how much data do you need to feed these models?
Mhm.
And if you're aggregating vast amounts of data, whose is it? Where did it come from?
Yeah, the provenance.
And is it, are you introducing bias
Exactly.
to that is informing the decision making?
Mhm.
So let's step back and say, in that, because we sort of started to talk about like the first one of what are
Yeah.
the learnings, what are some of the key use cases? I did want to talk about monetization because we'll
Yeah.
just level set on that quickly,
Yeah.
and then let's dig into these use cases and the differentiated ones that make sense to focus in on. Hold on, if I
Did
have,
you say you had a slide you wanted to show
I
us?
do. So
Let's see it.
let's see. So this is, I hope you can all see
Mhm.
this, but this is just, what do we mean? Because it's getting thrown around a lot about monetization and the idea of, what is data monetization? And it again links to this trajectory that we've all been on where you focused on the use of data. It really just means around the idea of creating a quantifiable benefit from the use of data. And there's sort of a, a it moves across from the more basic of just improving existing products and services, personalization, segmentation, and creating relevance around customer preferences, which honestly, I was at one of the larger payment companies 20 plus years ago driving personalization capabilities there. And so that is not a new use case, right? The ability to pull in third-party data appropriately and those kinds of things. But then there's creating data products, which is building out either internal facing or external facing data products that can tell you a story with data, help you drive direct decisioning. Again, these are not revolutions. They encompass some of the sort of forecasting and BI capabilities that have been around for quite a long time. They help inform operational patterns and decision making. What is increasingly being used is look to create new forms of data products using some of these using some of the insights from structured and unstructured data to enhance what's possible. And then increasingly, because of the hunt for the need for large sets of data to help create more and the ability to bring together data sets that historically were unstructured and unavailable in new form factors, there's this idea that what might be one company's data exhaust is a phrase, could be another company's treasure. Being able to link data sets that historically have not been linked, perhaps because of privacy considerations, perhaps in anonymized ways, synthetic ways, but ways to bring data sets that historically were not together to inform new ways of working, new insights. And so it's sort of as you move forward, there's an increasingly recognition of the diverse ways that data can inform internal and external strategy and create new forms of business for an organization, either directly than in businesses that they manage or that they syndicate out in some form or fashion directly or as a joint venture or as a licensing relationship. Is there any comments here, perhaps, Andrew, of like things that you've seen in this space?
Yes, I think there, and David put a question in the chat too, which I think speaks to a lot of the three categories, which is to whom does the data belong?
Mhm.
And what is the scope in which you're authorized to use that data? And I think to David's point, where you see the New York Times suing over OpenAI, allegedly, not violating intellectual property. That's a business situation, which I think may increasingly arise. We get guidance from federal regulators who, at least in the consumer realm, have pointed to the consumer being the owner of their data. And that's how the CFPB is going to be structuring its open banking rule, with really giving ultimate control over the consumer on how that gets managed. And I think it raises a lot of points whether you're talking about internal use of AI to improve business efficiency, or aggregating the data and trying to sell those the predictions that can be made from the use of that data out into the marketplace about how the consumer is going to perceive that use of data, how they're going to see it maybe under a privacy law lens, like we've seen in recent lawsuits, how we might see it from a violation of what the CFPB is putting out for consumer protection on the scope of data, how we might see it under traditional consumer financial protection statutes like the Fair Credit Reporting Act, where there are inaccuracies that are translated into the data, and who's responsible for responding to the consumer and correcting perceived inaccuracies. So I think all of these areas start to implicate that the traditional legal regimes that still exist and that people are going to be very attuned to as the use of data and the use of data through the AI processes becomes more widely implemented.
So one question, quick follow-up on that is are you seeing the shift for CFPB to be more aligned or similar to the trend that was sort of set by the European countries with GDPR, or are there key differences? Because I think some of us who have been in the payments and banking space have kind of had to internalize that because it was regulated more crisply earlier. What do you see as same and different as you think about the risks and opportunities that you are seeing worth exploring in the payments and banking space with AI use cases?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of opportunities for businesses to have access and reliable access to data that they previously either couldn't get because it wasn't carried over in a machine readable way, or because they only got certain access to certain pieces of information. Now they can get a much larger scope of data, and that is probably very reliable because of the accuracy demands that the open banking rule will place on data providers. So there is a great opportunity there to develop new products and services by entities that traditionally couldn't compete with, let's say, a bank or a credit card company. Also, those entities can start using data from other data providers to compete, with what fintechs have traditionally done. So there's a lot of opportunity to go back and forth and expand a business's market. At the same time, the CFPB, like what the EU did, it is demanding a very high level of accuracy with a lot of testing. It'll probably implicate credit reporting in some fashion, although that's still an unknown. And we'll see how that gets resolved in the final rule. And there are some very strict parameters on the scope of what you're authorized to use and the length of time you can use it. And all of those things are compliance issues and raise costs for complying with the rule that should be factored into what a business perceives as its return on the investment that it's making into expanding into these areas and using AI to analyze the data that it can obtain.
Got it.
I think taking a step back to your previous question, right, Maria, like what are the use cases that we really see? If we look at practical way we are trying to approach it is a 2x2 matrix. Is it for internal use or external use? That's the lens that we apply. The second one is it going to drive efficiency, operational effectiveness, productivity gain, meaning which is more of a play that we are not directly going to take to our customers? Or is it really going to be some new revenue generating or value generating product? So which of these lenses that it falls under? Right now, I think Gartner recently released a survey where they speak about it. We are all operating in the topmost quadrant, which is internal users just for operational efficiency purpose. I think most of the generative AI use cases we see, be it I build a knowledge base, I build a chat bot for, say, the internal members or for the call center. All these are still more of an efficiency play. Even marketing content generation, which is, I think, one of the widely used use case, is still there is going to be a human in the middle. Whatever used to happen by a designer, which used to take, say, hours or weeks to generate, we are hoping generative AI could generate it at a much more faster pace. So it's just a jump start that we're expecting from generative AI. That's the place that we are playing in. The real monetization, meaning the are there data products that generative AI could give, which I could go and sell to my customer as a value-added product, or sell to my customer as a brand new product that my company is offering, is a space I would say still an exploration. Again, probably Erin has thoughts around where is looking at this, what is the industry looking at that particular space. But that's what I see from most of the industries that are practically trying to use generative AI on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I mean, we have very similar data that I think we just published it yesterday. We have data across industries, but I pulled the financial services data that shows that most of the activity that is in production, not experimentation, but production Gen AI work is focused on cost reduction. And the vast majority of it is sort of assistance and efficiency driven customer service efficiencies. The co-pilots, the sort of augmenting the notes or the meeting preparation for your wealth advisors, that sort of thing in financial services and payments. You see lots and lots of activity. We're doing an enormous amount of that type of work, and all the call service stuff. And our clients are forecasting, and based on the results thus far, estimating, anywhere between 20 to 30% reduction in cost in the next 2 to 3 years based on those investments from the production activity that they have going on right now. So that's pretty promising. That's real return on investment.
Right.
Interestingly, Andrew, from the risk and compliance space, estimates are 15 to 25% uplift in, not uplift, cost reduction or increase in efficiency in terms of your compliance operations, which is actually nice. That can be very cumbersome processes. And then,
Exactly.
less not as big numbers, but still like reasonable, anywhere from like 7 to 15% for back office, middle and back office at the banks, and in payment processors, and some 10 to 15% for marketing, some IT and some HR. So that's real.
And that kind of resonates with where, like, at least I could say in our company how we are using it.
What you're seeing.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
the space, like code generation, co-pilot or a software engineer, I think that's one big space where we are using many tools. And then if you look at it like sales, like I talked to someone earlier, I used to summarize everything, put in notes. Now you could have some agent which is summarizing all those, sends a follow-up email and things like that. Same is in the marketing space. And then obviously call center, where again, notes taking, summarizing the calls, those kind of stuff. I think the percentages resonates really well. But again, it's too early, I would say. I think probably there is much more that we could explore in these spaces. But these are the use cases which are definitely in production, which are definitely giving the productivity jump.
Yeah.
And I'll drop the stats I just cited into the chat.
Great. Thank you. And what do you think are the characteristics? I mean, the ones that I've been seeing are where you are taking it, I would call the squirrely processes that have, but are very information intensive in terms of, as you said, unstructured, trying to find the needle in the haystack, helping to make the haystack a little tighter, so that you can basically drive, an intelligent front end experience because you've made the back office, made the things that were happening behind the scenes more understandable, readier, brought clarity to things that right now are labor intensive to sort of parse through information. What do you think is needed to make those use cases and payments zing, and what are the characteristics of the readiness of an organization to be able to do so? Because we had a very deep conversation about it's not about throwing data at things. If the data doesn't have a foundation of organization, governance, definition, you gotta clean your house. You gotta get certain things, foundational
Yeah.
pieces in place. What needs to be in place to even start to do that, those cost reductions from your perspective? I know we've been involved in some work with organizations around establishing foundational data governance, foundational data strategy and hygiene, things that will allow you to kind of go after those opportunities. What's your thoughts?
I think one area is having a very clear governance structure for how AI is going to be implemented. Also, then having a very clear set of policies and procedures, which maps over into the compliance arena, so that when you're trying to implement a very complex set of rules, you have something that can be easily followed. And it isn't going to produce sort of strange results. So it really goes back to sort of a fundamental point, which is you want the inputs to be something that is going to produce a good result at the end, whether it's the efficiencies of a compliance program, whether it's the assist of a call center drawing on what the business practices are and the methods for the waterfall for resolving a problem, or whether it's, for instance, in underwriting, if you want to expand your market share and look at different sources of data for credit, making sure you're not introducing bias into the process at the beginning. So those are all things that I think need to be set up from the get-go. And then when you layer in working with a vendor or somebody who might be supplying data, a lot of contractual and indemnification provisions, so that you have the right to examine data that's coming and make sure that it's accurate, demand testing, the right to perform your own testing. All of those aspects are things that are important to establish. Oh, and preservation of data, so that if you have a supervisory body that wants to see your data, that you have the right to access it and that it still exists, particularly if it's held by another entity on your behalf. So those are things to set up at the beginning so that you don't run into trouble, down the line with a program that's been using AI to examine those data.
So that intersection of the due diligence and the process definition needs to be at next level versus just reviewing contracts and making sure that data centers are not in stupid places. You're sort of articulating a level of specificity around how to think about where the risks might come over time, almost assuming there are risks, right? The verification, that's a really important point we talked about the known unknowns. It's almost the expectation of scrutiny needs to be built into the process.
Yeah, exactly, Maria.
Yeah, I mean, we're dealing with new technology that is evolving very quickly. We cannot assume we know what we're doing.
I think even the foundation is,
I mean, that's a fact.
Right.
Absolutely. I think even the foundation is the data. I don't know how many organizations really understand what their data is. Do they even have a good data for these models to go against? So to your question, I think that's the base. Yeah.
They don't. They don't. And they know they don't. And they're scrambling around trying to figure out who's got what. And
Yeah, because it's garbage in, garbage out.
So absolutely. And it always has been.
It always has been.
And now just how true that is
Yeah.
becoming profoundly transparent.
Yeah.
Because everybody is suffering from acute FOMO, and it's all the way up at the top of the house. And
Yeah.
they're like, what do you mean we can't? We need months to get our data in order. What do you mean? Haven't we got databases and da 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 da? I'm like, well, yes, we have 12 of them.
Right. Yeah, we have 3 different copies of production data in different sets.
Yeah,
And oh,
yeah,
by the way, hundreds
yeah,
of individual
yeah.
databases with models in them.
Yeah, yeah, and then someone starts talking to the executives about data, and their eyes glaze over. This is not straightforward.
No, no. How, where are you guys seeing the ability? What's the beginning of creating the traction needed and the focus around some of the more promising use cases? We talked about a number of them, taking the squirrely processes, whether it's and bringing the efficiency, whether it's customer call centers. You talked about risk and underwriting, fraud. Like,
Mhm.
what are do we need to help? Is one of the processes to help identify the concentric circles of what are the core data sets that need to have rigor and hygiene and then map to the use cases that are the most promising and start somewhere? Because I think there's FOMO, but there's also overwhelm of like, where do I
Mhm.
start? I can't
Mhm.
fix,
Mhm.
if I want to start somewhere, I
Mhm.
can't fix my
Mhm.
under attention in core data foundational practices overnight. I can't wish those into being. My tech stack may have, I mean, we saw at least one example with a client where, Agile became a reason to not have a particularly strong definition of what the technology infrastructure and patterns needed to be. So it
Mhm.
makes everything much more complex. That was an interesting situation where the intersectionality between technology governance and data governance came to the fore. What are you guys seeing as some of the foundational building blocks that allow you to build traction and focus around promising use cases?
See, what I see, there is definitely interest and top-down push.
Okay.
Every board of directors are questioning on, are we doing something in generative AI? I think it's the topic of the town, so everyone wants to be in that space. So the traction is definitely there, but I think earlier it was more of experimentation, or probably even now there is a lot of experimentation that happens. They just want to play around with the technology. They just want to see what it could potentially go. Probably we are going to be over that hump pretty soon, because I think it all starts with like any other data products that we have seen in the past, or even for that matter, any product that we want to roll out. What is the value that it's going to generate? Is there a real benefit of the product? Is there a real benefit of using the technology to generate the business case? I think that's going to be the key. I think it's like any other product that I have seen from a data standpoint, because when data analytics came, big data came, people were just trying to do a lot of analytics on the data. They were trying to build BI dashboards. BI has always been there.
Everything.
Data warehouse has always been there. So some of them falls flat because it's not a real use case. You're trying to fit a Ferrari to do something which could be done using a simple one. So I think that's where probably everyone should start focusing on. Start thinking about use cases that is going to benefit the business. Start building a real business case on the value it drives. Is it going to be a new monetary kind of a product? Is it going to bring a new customer? It's going to help me onboard customers at a much more faster pace. Or even from an operational efficiency standpoint, I see a lot of use cases where it's going to reduce the time that a call center rep takes the call. So probably they could use that time to take more calls to sell more products. So internally, it's going to convert into some kind of a revenue numbers. I think that's what I see that we have to do more. I mean, experimentation is good, playing around is good. Probably there is going to be a time pretty soon where we are going to say, okay, I'm tired of all those. Let's really see if there is a value that we could drive using that.
My sense is that the shift sort of in the last 6 to 8 months has gone from, we know what the business, we know there's confidence there is a business case here. The efficiency the internal efficiency play is pretty clear.
Yeah.
And there's enough data out there that you can build that business case. So that's pretty clear. All of the anxiety about data, like privacy and data security, we're over that hurdle for sure. I think that the biggest concerns are around talent. I cannot get people who know how to do this.
Yeah.
And the biggest concern that we're seeing is I cannot deal with my data. I can't I cannot get this and that is the biggest hurdle. I mean, I think there's some pretty decent ourselves and our competitors, like there's pretty solid frameworks to prioritize.
Yeah.
I mean, there's armies of consultants that can help you block and tackle and get ready to do this and do the change leadership and manage all that.
Right.
It's not that different than in any other digital transformation.
Yeah.
We know how to do that. But these are data hungry models, and they're pretty sophisticated, and we just are not like the ML models that were sort of, I don't want to say rudimentary because they're very powerful tools, but this is an order of magnitude different, and the vastness of what you need to feed it, we're just not ready for.
Right. And it's also the complexity of the combination. You have to bring in the vastness, and then you have to then combine it with other things and re-engineer the process.
Right. And I think to really get the value out of this, what you want to do is take these new models and use them to feed into your traditional models.
Exactly.
Get the results, feed them back out, and then use these to prompt, explain, do something with the output, and use it as a prompt to the next level. And that in and of itself, that churning and recalibration, and then perhaps another level through, is just an enormous amount of compute.
Right.
And that's where you get into the sort of the next level stuff. Like then we're going to start using quantum and all of that, but that's another day.
That's a different conversation.
We're not going to do that today.
I think we also need to understand we are not trying to build a new large language models. I think there are enough in the market.
Oh, no, we got them.
Yeah. I think everyone needs to understand that we are just going to use the models to get a result out. So the technologies or the techniques that currently exist, like RAG, the retrieval augmented generation, where you take your data, you just do all the masking, you take all the PII information out, ensure that whatever is the bare minimal that can hit the LLM, ensuring your internal compliance, info security, everything is signed off on that. I think that will help us accelerate things faster because we are not really looking at even fine-tuning the models. I don't see a use cases where we really have to take and fine-tune a model because the models exist. Techniques like RAG definitely helps us to move much, much faster for the payment use cases that we are looking at. Unless we are like a big firm which is trying to do a complete R&D, things like that are different. But for the regular bread and butter use cases that we want to try out in payment space, I think existing LLMs, just use them with techniques on top of it. I think that will help us accelerate many of these use cases much, much faster.
So one thing, and then I definitely want to go to you, Andrew, is around things you talked about techniques. One of the things that we've been seeing is the need to make sure that you inject the right knowledge context as you're doing that work. So, you guys probably can give me better examples of more precise examples, but making sure that if there's reference data that can help and guide the interpretation using the large language models, this was in the healthcare space, but understanding, codes around, healthcare diagnosis codes, or in payments, it might be around, pricing logics or other things that would allow you to understand how to interpret the data correctly. So it's that combination of learning that needs to happen. What are
Right.
other things that allow the
Like
data
domain
filtering?
expertise and subject matter expertise and data,
Yeah.
so that you have the judgment to understand, okay, that's what this is telling me.
Right.
Exactly.
I think
And
That sort
we
of
call it
tuning.
as grounding. Oh, sorry, Andrew, just one point. We
But
call it
no,
we
as
no,
gotta let
go ahead.
Andrew in here.
That's okay.
No, we call it as grounding, right? So you need to ground the queries to what is your industry, your organization specific context. And that's where I think the prompt engineering is gaining so much of traction, because you need to generate prompt. And it's a skill. I think it's not going to be like first time you're going to be successful with whatever prompts you're generating. So you have to make sure that you learn, you give the right set of information into your prompt, so that when it hits LLM, the LLM has all the details, meaning, am I a call center person? I'm a software engineer. Am I an analyst? So you need to give information from that, saying this person as so and so, and this person is an expert. He's trying to find out some information, or he's a naive person trying to find some information. All of those helps you to get the response much closer to what you are anticipating. So that's the training and tuning that you have to go through. That exercise has to be done.
And
Andrew.
to build on Satish's point, I think the grounding is really fundamental. Where, for instance, I think we all are aware in the crediting space, there's this, big interest in using unstructured data to try to understand consumer habits.
Yeah.
And it can be a very dangerous area, because of if your model isn't appreciating the types of bias that might be introduced through different data sets. So for instance, the HUD DOJ lawsuit of Facebook, where the data was coming in and the algorithm was looking at people's habits, according to the allegations in the complaint, and filtering out certain housing opportunities for people in protected categories based on their social media habits. So that's, I think, a classic example of, you really have to train whatever you're doing to know that you can't use certain pieces of data to make certain decisions. And how you do that, I think, to Aaron's point, takes a lot of talent to be able to set up the model correctly from the get-go, so that you're not introducing that bias and that you're being able to harness the power of the unstructured data that's there, and what is going to be permissible, and to be able to test it as you go along, so that you're making sure that you're not running afoul of a lot of the regulations that are out there that will get businesses into hot water if they're not doing that due diligence at the beginning, and then as things progress with the use of the data.
And it's amazing because, one of the things, I spent some time looking at financial inclusion efforts for a couple of years, was a big focus of mine. And one of the things that's ironic in that was the idea that, the access to more diverse data sets and unstructured data, historically unused data categories, could be proxy to help broaden fair access to credit. And yet your point about that sensitivity is incredibly important, because unintended consequences, all positive intent maybe to give reasonable credit to those who might not be fairly represented or ideally represented in just that credit score, but then what else have you thrown in there?
Right. And I don't mean to imply at all that when a business shouldn't look at expanding their market, because there's a big business upside as well as a big societal upside, right?
Right.
You have people with thin credit profiles who have the ability to repay their debt obligations, and why not try to reach them? And that's, why businesses operate, is to expand market.
Right.
But understanding what are the data sets that are going to produce results that don't have an unintended consequence is really the goal. And to thread that needle, it takes talent, and it takes some setting up the models in ways that don't produce those unintended results.
And not feeding the models with the same set of criteria that you would use with a different population, right?
Exactly.
It's that, I mean, it's almost that basic. Like
Yeah.
this is not the same.
Yes.
We're trying to expand, not apply the same measurements. We've got some good questions in the chat that I don't know the answer to. So there's a question about the energy consumption associated with Gen AI. And like, if we, went backwards 10 years and we're talking about Bitcoin, I could probably answer this question, but I can't answer this question about Gen AI. So I don't know.
It sounds as if there are major demands that will be put on the US grid.
Yeah.
That
But
I'm not sure that
it's already struggling.
It's already struggling. So that
Talk
is
to
like,
folks in Texas.
yeah, it's certainly a major concern and it's interesting to think about all of the externalities that go into implementing a new type of technology. And that's certainly one, the infrastructure capabilities.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it's a good question.
it is a good question. And one question that also popped in, and thanks for drawing my attention to the chat. Can AI be helpful in where have you seen it be helpful to doing that scrubbing and cleaning and some of the readiness factors? Have you guys been able to see use cases where that's made a material difference in the readiness to do the work? Help you build the foundation. Is that a use case that has been successful at helping to create value?
I see that very commonly, meaning multiple of the service providers, data service providers, like the traditional ETL tool providers or the current public cloud service providers, they all tend to do data scrubbing, data profiling. Like even within our own organization, we have used generative AI to generate metadata, like what used to be a data steward sitting and writing details about an attribute, the entire data cataloging, the data lineage, whichever used to be a human-centric job. We are able to use generative AI to give a jump start. You obviously need a human in the middle because it's not going to be 100% correct because it interrupts, say, _CT as a count or _CT as a quote. So I think you still need someone to go and validate it, but definitely using generative AI techniques, using these LLM models, many things that used to be a manual job, like data profiling, data quality analysis, the metadata generation, data lineage, even cleaning the data to some extent, because we have used even traditional ML for scrubbing the data. Like if there are spaces in the name, can we remove it? Meaning, are there abbreviations like junior, JR, JUNAOR, are they one and the same? The models can learn and scrub the data accordingly. So that's definite space where we could use generative AI, but you have to have someone take the results, feed the model back with feedback so that it learns and it becomes more efficient.
Yeah, it has to be coached, really.
Yeah, coached.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. Coached.
And there was like, just thinking about the data inputs, I haven't read it yet, but I just downloaded an academic paper about applying the language models to Excel. And I was like, ooh, this is going to be fun.
Yeah. I wanted to pick on two things. One was you said a comment about privacy sort of being, we'll get over that, or maybe that was a misquote, but like the idea that we'll figure out how to address the privacy questions. Do you think that what are we seeing that's going to help privacy and other sort of considerations around that, become more clear? Because right now it just feels like you could run afoul almost accidentally. I think that's the fear, right? So what are the structured ways to help make sure that privacy considerations that might be coming out of the US or Europe are going to be, that can be designed in some degree of privacy by design as we look to incorporate these rich data sets in new ways? What are some of the things that make it safer, and what are the things that can be missing at times and contribute risk to both individuals and the organizations that are using that data?
Well, one, I think, sort of framing device that the CFPB is intending to implement is the open banking rule, which is really a data privacy rule. And the demands that will be put upon businesses that are covered entities, either data providers or people receiving the data, are very rigorous, both in terms of data storage and those types of protections, as well as testing the accuracy of the data, so that you know that that when somebody is representing that this data associated with a particular consumer, if they say that there's a 99.5% accuracy rate,
Okay.
so that they're not translating errors into the data as it's transmitted between different entities. So that, I think that's a lens that will be very important for businesses who work with consumer data and are taking advantage of the access to data that the open banking rule will provide, is really to start thinking about, are there data storage capabilities meeting what the new standard will be? Are there testing for accuracy meeting what the new standard will be? And those are, I think, things that people can think about now, even though the rule isn't finalized. And to your earlier point, Maria, like what are some things that are happened in the EU that may or may not be happening here? Well, I think one of the lessons learned in the EU is it took a very long time for data providers to get their portals for accessing data up and running and tested and accurate. And the CFPB did not apparently learn from that. And then the proposed rules set forth a very fast time period to comply, for a data provider to comply with setting up a portal. So if you're in a business that may be subject to the proposed rule as a data provider, these are all things that should be taken into consideration now, so that you're not behind the 8 ball later once the rule comes into effect.
A really good point. Since we're getting into budget season, put a line in there.
Yeah, exactly.
Then I think we are about, I think maybe we're at the time where we should talk about, visions for the future. Because I know we're at a point where we can go a little bit over, but we wanted to wrap up by no later than 10 after to go into the breakouts. So I think it would be good to just check in and say, what do we think is the future of AI, sort of in a 1 to 3 year horizon? What do you see changing? What do you, if you have your crystal ball, what's your safe bet versus your stretch?
To take it, I think what I see, at least on the payment industry, we are going to get more and more matured with the operational efficiency stuff, because that's where you are going to really have the biggest ROI, return on investment. So next year or two, because right now there is a lot of experimentation, so probably next year or two, you're going to see more and more generative AI-based use cases helping in the operational efficiency side of sales, marketing, the call center, the service operations, even in some of the internal development, like software development kind of an area, testing, human resources, all those places. I think we are going to see more and more use cases on operational efficiency side. 3 years down the line, I think there is an interesting paper from BCG as well, which talks about it. So the quadrant that I spoke about, internal operational efficiency, will get more matured. External, putting something for the customer in our portals or in our mobile apps, are going to be some of the things that we are going to see, like chatbot for the external customers, or a prospect right now, rather than someone picking up the phone and calling someone, can there be an automated calls that could go out? Similarly, when the calls comes in, can there be a conversational bot which can answer those calls and pull in the prospect information? So those external customer efficiencies are going to be the next one that we are going to see more. Then probably 3+ years, or maybe around 3-year mark, is when you are going to really see products which are going to be generated out of generative AI. Like, can generative AI or LLMs really be used to create a differential product? Can a company come and say, I have a product which is purely based on generative AI? I think that's going to be somewhere around 2+ or 3 year mark around. That's how I see the horizon.
I think we're already seeing, I mean, you know, the tools that are in natural language that are allowing finance and customer service reps and payment operations teams at merchants to query their transactional data, whether it's Stripe or Billtrust or trying to think of other companies that are doing this. That is all happening today. So that is not a year from now. That's not 3 years from now. They're using the language models against the transactional data, and you don't have to be a coder in order to find out what's going on with your transactional data. Someone in the product team could figure out what was they could do an A/B test and figure out what was going on with the sales of a particular solution by exposing, do a different UX and see what had happened, and they could find out in real time. And that you could do that right now. So I think that's actually already happening. I think the competitive pressure within the industry is going to force these things to happen sooner. And because, the language models, they're going to be available to the developers. They're going to use them.
Right.
And I think further out, and I don't know how soon it'll happen, but I'm going to be sitting here and I'm going to tell Alexa I want to have a Moroccan themed dinner party, and the ingredients will arrive. I'll say, I've got preserved lemons. I've got some couscous and I've got some preserved lemons.
I think the AI agents is what is already.
Yeah.
Just go figure it out.
Right.
Just figure it out. I'd prefer the produce to come from Buy Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And that will happen.
Yep.
And
and invite my friends down the block. That, and clear my schedule after 3 on Friday so I can cook.
Right. But what also that implies is you're not sitting there thinking about the payment. The payment is just invisible.
Oh, but I'm not
yeah.
thinking about the payment anyway. Like packages arrive. Like,
Yeah.
Meta's covered that. I'm ordering things on Instagram that I didn't even, did I press purchase? Did that happen?
I just wanted to interject one quick possible legal development, because
is what I'm doing illegal?
No.
Not the Moroccan lemons. I think you're okay there.
Nothing to do with the themed dinner party, which I think sounds delightful.
Oh, you can come.
Excellent. I'll look forward to it. And is really what is going to happen with the issue of bias and who's going to be enforcing this issue. For instance, the CFPB has put a marker in the ground that it has the ability to look at discrimination outside of crediting decisions,
right?
Which is which would be under its abusive practices authority under Dodd-Frank.
Yeah.
And I think there's a big question here. So keep tuned to the space about, does it have the authority after the Supreme Court's recent decision? Is that going to be challenged? And what is this? If so, what is the scope of what it's going to be examining? So, if you're providing a service to customers and it's more expensive, let's say for a certain group of people who might traditionally have been protected under, let's say, Equal Credit Opportunity Act, and they're incurring greater costs in receiving that service versus another group of people, is that going to be actionable by the CFPB or other state regulators, or by private litigants who have some cause of action that they can latch onto? And I think all of these traditional type of causes of action are things that, again, get ahead of the curve with your legal team with your outside counsel, with your compliance group, with your technology folks, so that you can really start preparing for having answers to those legal challenges. And I think that all of these things are going to, that right now AI is still at a point where it hasn't received as much attention as it might, but all the indicators are that the traditional ways of trying to protect consumers will be applied.
Could AI be used for good? Could the models help a
Yes.
consumer
Yes,
Yeah.
most certainly.
protect them from usurious things? Could the models say, no, don't buy this, there's a better thing here for you?
Absolutely. I think so.
Okay.
And an example of that is the new appraisal rule that the
Right.
CFPB has issued,
Okay.
which is looking at requiring automated appraisals of properties, which can really eliminate bias, right, from a human appraiser. So definitely, Aaron, there are a lot of upsides,
And I think about the power, if I like the statistics, if you look at how AI is being used in the industry. I mean, I spoke earlier and I said, look, we have really mature fraud models. But if you look at all the press releases that are coming out and talk to the technologists at the networks, they are achieving phenomenal improvements in their fraud models.
Yeah.
I mean, unbelievable improvements. That is good. There's no question that is good for the industry, that is good for consumers. Now, the fraudsters are also employing these new
Right.
tools. And it is, as always, the arms race that it is. But I have to assume that the AI is going to be good at recognizing the AI. But I mean, there are good things that will come of it. I want to at least also say, let's think about deploying AI for good. I think there's a competition that MasterCard has put on. The deadline might be tomorrow for it's I'm going to try and remember the name of it and probably butcher it. I'll put it in the chat, but it's like the MasterCard Center for Inclusive Growth and maybe data.org have a contest for using AI for good.
Yeah. I mean, I think it raises the bar potentially for, inherent in financial services and payments is trust. And so when do we start to really recognize that what we're trying to do, yes, the industry is going to make money from the movement of money, the storage of money, the safeguarding of resources and the advisory service that allows it to grow. But ultimately, the system is based on trust. And when we've gotten away from that, it has been at the industry's peril and at customers' negative impacts. So I think it's an interesting note. Is there anything else? I think we are at the point of wanting to do the breakouts. We didn't touch on two things, and I just wanted to highlight the question of IP that came up, which is, as you're looking to one of the chat points was, if we're looking to build new models and work in partnership with others in the AI companies, are there clear guidelines around how IP is managed so that you understand the relationship?
Well, I'll say from one perspective is, I think for these partnerships to be successful, there has to be a clear definition of who can use certain pieces of data, and that's an end user, a business that's employing a vendor's algorithm has the right to examine how that's being developed because of the way liability falls. The government federal regulators have now for the past 15 years really tried to put the onus on the financial services businesses, and naturally, let's say a fintech company that's developed something and spent a lot of resources in investing in the R&D to develop technology, may not want to share how that works with its customer. But those are the types of I think it's more of a conversation that the partners who are helping each other out need to have, so that you're ensuring that you're reducing exposure liability and not creating a situation where you're putting each other at risk because of a lack of efficient communication about how a technology is working.
Right.
I think the AI providers have certain clauses already, like OpenAI says, if you're using from a business account, they are not going to store your data. But again, there are a few lawsuits which claims that the data is used. So I think it's that area which is still a little bit gray. But I think probably we just have to get matured with some of these AI providers on the clauses, including the IP clauses, the data sharing clauses, and things like that. I think we definitely have to mature on those.
Yeah.
So lots of maturing to come. But I think now is the time for us to sort of maybe talk in the smaller groups, take advantage of the perspective of the individual participants who have been joining us. And thank you for the chat questions. I think we tried to get to most of them, and we'll look forward to the breakouts now, and then we'll come back at the very end just to say goodbye.
Awesome.